Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would give my breakdown of the Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira fight, which, of course, was a very interesting fight, and of course, was going to be a great matchup because Ilia Topuria, of course, who recently has been one of the brighter shining stars on the UFC's roster, he recently, of course, was able to show his greatness at the 145-pound weight class, first capturing the 145-pound title, the featherweight title, within that of the UFC by beating that of an Alexander Volkanovski by knocking him out, I believe, in the second round. And then, of course, right after that, being the first and only fighter to knock out Max Holloway in a fight, especially at the 145-pound weight class. So Ilia Topuria, of course, who has been showing his recent greatness, he eventually decided to take it up to another level and tried to move up to the 155-pound weight class. Now, of course, he originally wanted that, I believe, of Islam Makhachev, but Islam Makhachev had other plans. He stated that he did not want to fight Ilia Topuria because apparently Ilia Topuria had not been in line long enough or did not deserve the title shot over other 155 pounders. Or he only fought fighters that had a little bit of legacy or cleaned out certain weight classes. Now, whether Islam Makhachev was really doing it because of that or because that was somewhat of a built-in excuse not to fight Ilia Topuria because he thought that he was going to be a major issue, maybe it's a little bit of both. I'm not quite sure. But I'll give Islam a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because to be fair, he did fight a lot of guys that had been at that weight class, for a while, such as Dustin Poirier, or guys overall that did eventually earn their shot, whether it be Charles Oliveira or whether it be Dustin Poirier, Volkanovski, who cleaned out 145 basically, and some other stuff. So, I mean, I'll give Islam a slight benefit of the doubt, and of course, I understand moving up to 170 to try to become a two-weight division champion. But I will state this. As a Makhachev, in my personal view, he does realize that this dude, Ilia Topuria, that this dude is possibly going to be a major handful. And this this tonight overall was just another example. Ilia Topuria, for those of you that don't know, of course, was able to get the knockout over Charles Oliveira within that of the first round. Now, unfortunately, I was not able to post my fight prediction because I had a trip all the way in Houston, and of course, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, so it was a very, very long trip, and I had to drive there. But the thing is, overall, is that I did kind of want to commentate on this fight because Ilia Topuria, although the first time I seen him, I pretty much recognized him from, the Patty the Batty press conferences. And I remember this little Georgian dude that apparently had, this problem with Patty. And I was like, I wonder who this guy is. I wonder overall, how good he actually is. Or I thought that, Patty maybe was going to eat him up because I really didn't know who the hell this guy was. And Patty, of course, was a big star at the time. He still is a big star. But Ilia Topuria, the first time that I ended up seeing him fight, was against the great jiu-jitsu prodigy and Bryce Mitchell. He was undefeated at the time. Ilia Topuria fought him, and Ilia Topuria had thoroughly dominated him. And then in the next fight, I believe it was against Josh Emmett, someone that, doesn't always win some of the bigger fights in his career, but someone that has won some of the bigger fights in his career, someone who also was a very dangerous striker and a one-shot knockout artist. And Ilia Topuria basically made him look destitute. And that's when I first noticed that this dude probably is the best all around boxer that I've ever seen for a UFC fighter ever within the history of the sport. And there's been a certain amount of very good boxers, within that of the UFC in recent years, all the way from not just to Topuria, but Conor McGregor, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, certain guys like that. Max Holloway, what I will personally say about him is that oftentimes, he gets regarded as the quote unquote best boxer in the UFC, or certain people claim that, but he never really has been that. And that's why every time he faces an actual elite boxer for a UFC fighter, he gets thoroughly dominated, whether it be against Dustin Poirier or Conor McGregor or Alexander Volkanovski or Ilia Topuria. He lost every single one of those fights because Max Holloway, at least in terms of peak level, is not really on the level of any of those fighters. It just is what it is. But I mean, anyways, the point is at least an all-around skill. But anyways, the point is overall that when we talk about Ilia Topuria, that you can tell that this dude that he has a massive boxing background. He knows how to change levels and set up, certain traps by changing levels. He has a great lead hand and knows how to use their momentum against them, or an opponent's momentum against them, especially within that of the striking category. He's someone overall that once again knows how to change levels. He knows how to parry to a certain degree. He's someone overall that knows how to keep his right and his left hand up at certain angles. He uses his feet to move in and outside of the range very, very well. He's someone that, once again, is a phenomenal level boxer, and you can tell overall that he has a great boxing background. But not only does he have a great boxing background, but he's also someone that is exceptional in the ground game and exceptional in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, the one question that I would have about Ilia Topuria is that how good is he going to be able to handle some of these quote-unquote Greco-Roman wrestling styles, or these guys that apparently have that Sambo wrestling? We all know that that Sambo wrestling has recently been a puzzle that a lot of fighters have not really been able to fix in most recent years, at least with the severe dominant wrestling types. Whether it be Kamaru Usman, who I don't know if he's Sambo or not, but someone who, of course, was a Division One wrestler within that of the United States, I believe. Or, if we are talking about Sambo, whether it be that of Merab Dvalishvili, or however you pronounce his name at 135, or whether it be Khabib Nurmagomedov, is a Makhachev, who of course is the recent prodigy at the 145, at the 155-pound weight class, who recently moved up to 170 to try to win the belt there over the Australian fighter who recently got that belt over Bilal Muhammad. But I mean, it'll be very interesting. But the fight that I would love to see Ilia Topuria in next would be against that of Arman Tsarukyan. That's going to be a very interesting fight. Not only is he the one that is the number one contender, but he's also someone that has that sambo or that wrestling type of style that could really prove and see how high of a level Ilia Topuria could possibly counter to that, because he's basically been able to counter every other style. Whether they have great, leg striking and hand striking, or great all-around boxing ability, or great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Charles Oliveira, of course, for anyone that knows him and his all-around skill set, he's not someone that is any light task. He's someone overall that is extraordinary in terms of jiu-jitsu practices. He's someone that is debatably the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioner within the UFC's history. He's up there with Jake Shields, Damian Maia, other guys like that in terms of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The Diaz brothers, certain guys like that. He's phenomenal. And he's a guy overall that had, a decent reach and height advantage over Ilia Topuria, and someone that probably had a weight advantage. And this was going to be the first time that Ilia Topuria had ever moved up in weight. So the fact that Ilia Topuria was able to knock him out within the first round and knock him out cold was something overall that definitely was a little bit surprising to a lot of people, and of course was definitely just another testament to his greatness. And one thing I'll personally state is this: I predicted Ilia Topuria to win this fight and eventually by stoppage, but I was even a little bit surprised myself. And I'm not usually surprised too often, but I was even a little bit surprised myself that he ended up knocking him out cold in the first round. Charles Oliveira, the reason why I predicted him to lose is because although he is a great striker, at least got better at it, to a degree in most recent years, Charles Oliveira is a guy that is just a little bit too hittable. He's a guy overall that, does not move out the center line very well. He's a guy that does not move his head extraordinarily well. He's a little bit too straightforward, and he's just too hittable. Now, he has gotten better at striking, but you can take advantage of him in those situations. It just is what it is. We've seen it against Dustin Poirier. We've seen it against some other fighters. I even think that he possibly got knocked down once or twice against Justin Gaethje. But if I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. Maybe that was against someone else. But, overall, Charles Oliveira, you can take advantage of him in those areas. And, of course, what the debate was is that would Charles Oliveira's size and would his jiu-jitsu skills be a little bit too much for Topuria? But what I had predicted, in my personal view, was that Topuria would be good enough or competent enough or great enough in the jiu-jitsu category that it probably wouldn't matter. And I wasn't even sure that if Charles Oliveira was going to be able to bring him down, and if he would bring him down, that it was going to be for very long. And that's exactly what ended up happening. He tried to get a takedown. He was close to getting it. Ilia Topuria ended up flipping it and ended up getting the top dominant position. And he ended up getting up on top, doing a slight amount of damage. Then, of course, bringing it back up to the feet. And then eventually, once he landed that right hook, to the chin, it was all over from there. So this dude, Ilia Topuria, not only overall, in my personal view, is he a phenomenal fighter, he would right now have to be debated as the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. When you talk about all-around skill set, he's debatably there. When you talk about any recent dominant fighter or champion, he's the most dominant or great fighter as of recent and probably has the best resume out of any recent fighter. And on top of that, he has no recent losses. He's completely undefeated as a fighter. He also has never, popped up for PEDs or anything like that. So Ilia Topuria, this dude right now, in my view, has to be the number one pound-for-pound fighter. And then the cherry on top, he's a two-weight division champion. And he was able to do it over Alexander Volkanovski, who is looked at as featherweight royalty, an all-time grade level fighter. He was able to do it over Max Holloway, who also was looked at as an all-time grade level fighter. Although Holloway, in my view, has been a bit overrated at times with his all around skill set, especially as a quote unquote boxer. But I mean, still an all time great level fighter, no doubt about it. And then, of course, after that, he was able to beat another debatable all time great level fighter, at least when he became champion, in Charles the Bronx Oliveira. Someone who was able to beat Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, and a few other very, very good contenders, Kevin Lee, and a couple of other people. So Ilia Topuria, the sky seems to be the limit for him. Now, a lot of people, of course, thought that, he came across as extremely cocky or arrogant to say that he was going to knock out Charles Oliveira within the first round. But I'm not really, surprised that he stated that because, Ilia Topuria is just a person that believes highly within himself. And, the amount of hate or the amount of heat that he ended up getting for that, in my view, was just ridiculous. I mean, Charles Oliveira, to be fair, has never been knocked out like this, at least in recent years, from what I've seen. To be honest, I don't know if he's ever been knocked out like this ever. But I mean, the thing is that Pete, like, it would be different if Ilia Topuria, didn't knock out Volkanovski, an all-time great level fighter, and probably the, debatably, in many people's eyes, the greatest featherweight of all time, or at least the most skilled featherweight of all time. I would say that Jose Aldo is probably my greatest featherweight of all time, just in terms of his accomplishments. But the most skilled featherweight of all time, you certainly could debate, is Alexander Volkanovski, at least combined with his accomplishments. And he was not only able to knock out him, but he was the first one to ever knock out Max Holloway. And then then he comes in this fight and knocks out Charles Oliveira. Like, the people overall just acted like it was something that was just going to be completely impossible. And it's like, I don't understand why Ilia Topuria wouldn't be confident he's done this within his last two fights over all-time grade level fighters. So it's like, it just is what it is. But a lot of people, they get insecure when they see someone that is self-made, someone that has a plan, and someone that has a very high belief in themselves and believes that they can do anything, and makes them very insecure because they didn't go that route, or things didn't always work out in that particular way, or they had troubles along the way, or they were not able to accomplish the things that they wanted to. So it creates a little bit of bitterness and jealousy, but it is what it is. But congratulations to Mr. Ilia Topuria. The fight pretty much went down how I thought it was going to go. I must admit that I did think that the fight was going to last a couple of more rounds, with Charles Oliveira getting knocked down a little bit more, and maybe with a little bit more of a fight and brawl up against the cage, with maybe them exchanging, certain grappling techniques, or with them exchanging, top position on the cage, and I thought eventually Ilia was going to catch him a few more times and eventually ground and pound him, and kind of have the fight stopped. But the first major right hand that he really landed, overall, at least one that Charles Oliveira ran into it, he knocked him out cold. And it was only going to be a matter of time because Charles Oliveira just runs into too many shots. He's just too hittable. It is what it is. But anyways, congratulations to Mr. Ilia Topuria. I just thought that I would talk about that because I don't talk about UFC quite as often, but I wanted to get a little bit more involved in it, especially with Ilia Topuria. Because this dude right here, all-time grade level fighter, all-time skilled grade level fighter, and someone that, in my view right now, he is the best fighter in the world. I don't think there's any doubt about it. He's debatably the most skilled fighter on the planet. He's definitely been the most dominant in his most recent resume in his last three fights. It's really not comparable. And when you talk about the way that he's done it, I mean, the only other fighter that would recently really be comparable would be Alex Piera. And of course, he recently lost to Magomed Ankalaev. So I don't think that we really can compare that anymore. Islam Makhachev, of course, many people would still debate him as number one. But with his most recent performance being a little bit shaky over a guy that, in my view, in Renato Moicano, someone that isn't really quite super great in my view, and someone that just lost to Benio Dariush on this card, I mean, it just is what it is. And with Ilia Topuria being a two-weight division champ, I would have to place him as the number one pound-for-pound fighter. But we'll see what ends up happening. But Ilia Topuria, this dude is special. The question is that can he possibly defeat someone like an Arman Tsarukyan or Islam Makhachev with that elite level wrestling? At the current moment, I would probably favor Islam just slightly because of his size advantage and, also, with him having that elite level wrestling. But if Ilia Topuria shows me a great showing against Arman Tsarukyan, that one Armenian wrestler and fighter, I would probably have to favor him over Islam. But it depends on how that fight goes. But Ilia, does seem a little bit tentative to take that fight. And I understand. Because Arman Tsarukyan is a guy that he's not extraordinarily popular. He's a guy that, overall does not have a super fan-friendly style. And he's a guy overall that, could possibly fuck up his, dream of facing Islam Makhachev to become either a three-weight division champion or become the concluded or consensus number one pound for pound fighter. So I kind of get it, but hopefully we see that fight next. Paddy the Baddy, of course, that fight would be very interesting. And of course, it's very big on paper, but Paddy, in my view, is just a little bit too flawed. Now, could he possibly win the fight? It's possible, especially because he's so huge for that weight class. In my view, Paddy's really more of a 170 pounder. I mean, I seen him against Michael Chandler, and that dude looked just as big as Kamaru Usman in that fight. It was ridiculous. But I mean, Paddy the Baddy, we'll see what ends up happening with him next. Of course, the fight would do great numbers because Paddy is a big star. He has a lot of charisma. And on top of that, Paddy, is a guy that has been more on the rise, and they have a history together of not liking each other. So it'd be a great fight. But Ilia seems to be a little bit more focused either on Paddy or Justin Gaethje as of next. So we'll see. But I would love to see Arman Tsarukyan next. Just my personal view of it. But congratulations to Mr. Ilia Topuria. His recent streak has been very impressive, especially because you can debate that he was possibly outsized in every single one of those fights, even against Alexander Volkanovski, who's 1 inch shorter. But Volkanovski is very girthy and very sizable for that weight class. Holloway, we all know, it probably belongs more to the 155-pound weight class, and Ilia was definitely outsized in that fight. Although he probably had the reach advantage, he definitely was not the lengthier or the bigger of the two fighters in all the round size. Although Max Holloway is not really someone that uses his legs, so, as much at least, so it doesn't always matter quite as much, but I mean, it is what it is. And then, of course, against Charles, he was at a size disadvantage in every category. So this dude overall is something special. It was great to watch the fight, in his most recent performances, and we'll see where he goes from here. It's going to be very exciting to see overall where he goes. But as of right now, I would have to claim that Ilia Topuria is the number one pound per pound fighter. Just my view of it. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see where this goes.